And this is basically some navigation ideas for like the future vision of navigation at GitLab. And this is specifically a analytics point of view, as I am looking at things through an analytics lens. And what is particularly important for analytics is not just having group specific views of analytics and project specific views of analytics, but having a broader instance type view. And that's like the key thing that's holding us back in terms of experience right now, because it's having an impact on how we jump from one analytics page to the next. And it's also quite confusing, especially when you're trying to not just look at projects and groups by themselves, but potentially a collection of projects and groups together side by side. So I'll start off. I've tagged a bunch of the existing research here that I've read through to provide some extra context, but I didn't want to rehash what the research had to say. But effectively, the research talks a lot about some of the key issues around usability of our navigation, and this approach tries to solve some of those issues as well as solving some analytics issues as well. So I did just an analysis on the navigation, and I found that breaking the navigation into these 4 buckets or categories was quite helpful for me to understand how we can reorient the analytics, the navigation, in order to make it more effective and easier to use. So I broke it down into this. Workspace, which is effectively the area and scope of information that you're working in. So this could be project, group, instance, but we could potentially reframe it as well to be looking at other things. So for example, security is now got a new page called Security Center. So that's reframing it from looking at a specific like project or group to looking at a capability. And if you think about what's in the more section, is effectively just all instance level navigation items. It's just behind this more section, which seems like an afterthought more than anything else. And then we have some global and also context specific actions based on where you are on the page. So within this project and within this, this group. And then we also have my stuff as well. So stuff that's relevant to me, as well as the objects, the workflow objects, which live within this particular workspace. So that's sort of how I think about breaking down the different areas of our navigation. And one key bit of user feedback that we had was the navigation is essentially very focused on the file structure of projects and groups and the objects that live within files and groups, rather than having a more relevant and user-centered approach. So if I'm a developer, I'm only interested in a small number of these workflow objects. If I'm a developer, I'm only interested in certain, like 5 tops projects and groups at any one time. So why do I need access to this as such a prominent navigation feature if I'm only interested in a small little tidbit of all this sort of stuff? So I think what we need to do is think about how we can balance these 4 buckets of workspace versus actions versus my stuff versus workflow objects in a way that makes the content that the user is seeing more relevant for them specifically. So I've dived into each of these areas right here in more detail, and you can read that asynchronously if you like. So those are the general challenges, and then I've sort of gone into this a little bit, but with regards to analytics, the challenges we're facing are we need instance level navigation, and right now our stopgap is putting stuff in the admin panel, but that's really restricting usage and access to analytics features. So that's quite challenging. And then the fact is, because analytics jumps between projects and groups and all this sort of stuff, it feels like quite a disconnected experience. So that's another challenge that we wanted to solve, is making it feel more cohesive when you're moving between levels of abstraction. And then there's also a duplication of efforts. There are not similar analytics pages when you move across the group and project. There's actually different. And that becomes super confusing if you don't know what's going on. So being able to sort that out would be a lifesaver as well. So here's the vision. And effectively the vision is one manifestation of the components below, but obviously these can be reconfigured in unique ways in different ways, but this is just one approach that I took to make it a little bit more tangible. So if the components below resonate with you, feel free to jump in and play about with these components and see what works for you. But I've created a prototype, and this video is going to go right here. Oh, actually, no, I'll come back. So this is the prototype. And, oh, has my screen paused? Resume. Oh, what's going on? Why can't I share Figma? That's really strange.
You might be sharing a specific window. Nope, there you go. I can see Chrome.
Yeah. Okay.
And there we are. Yeah.
Here we go. So this is the view, and what we have here with this view is a slightly different reconfiguration of where the things in GitLab live. Effectively, this is like the workspace or container. These are the workflow objects as you'd sort of expect them to be. Here's the search menu, and here's the actions menu, and then this whole sidebar is dedicated to my personal stuff. And what we're doing is we've collapsed and consolidated the project view and group view into one selection experience, because it's effectively selecting from the same tree of items, but for some reason we've differentiated project and group for a reason I don't quite understand. So the idea here is you can come into here, you can sort of filter by projects and groups, or you can have capability type views, as I talked about before, like security, and you can see stuff at the instance level, the group level, and project level. And what we're trying to do here is show the items in a consolidated list, but better differentiate what types of items are in this list, so it's easier for the user to make a choice. So in this case, I'm going to go to the instance, and it takes me to the instance view. I know I'm in the instance view because this workspace selector right here shows me that I'm in this. Underneath the workspace selector, I have a search menu and an action button, and I have the individual workflow items in here, which are part of the instance view. I also have my personal sidebar, which is sort of similar to what we have today, but you can do things like hover over the top of it to get like a quick look at what's in there. And then you could dive in and see it for yourself. And this collapses down just like you'd expect. But what's interesting here is rather than depending on the file and folder tree structure for helping users navigate to the projects and groups that they're interested in, we want to rely more heavily on bookmarks. We want to rely more heavily on searching, and we want to rely more heavily on filters in order to get to the workflow item that users are interested in. So for example, that could look like this, where you are searching for something, you're prompted with the sorts of things that you may be looking for. A lot of this is sort of inspired by how Slack may be doing it. And if you were to say search for analytics, you then get a federated search, which shows you specifically the groups, the projects, the things that you may be interested in, as well as things that may be within workflow menu items or settings or help or whatever it may be. and then you could search this properly if this doesn't come up, and then that would take you to a new page. But having the search stuff in context of the navigation gives you more items to choose from, but it also makes searching more of a navigation, like the primary navigation experience, in a similar way to like Google, rather than getting users to constantly rely on looking at the tree. They either search or they can go to their bookmarked things or bookmarked groups or projects or whatever that may be. So that is that's effectively it. And this primary action button is similar, where it is both gives you global actions, but also contextual actions based on the container that you're in. So the different solution components that I talked about, just to sort of summarize where I am. Oh, wrong one. Is to rearrange the nav areas to more effectively illustrate the relationships to what they are. So my stuff has its own space, and then actions and workflow sort of come underneath workspace, and either to show that proximity and relationship. Consolidate workspaces into a single selection experience whilst making it easier to understand whether they're an instance or a group or a project. So being able to differentiate between the two. Creating an instance level or cross workspace view. So going from this more thing to a workspace view for instance, or potentially taking a leaf out of security's book and creating like a capability view. As well as that, we can expand on this and create a dedicated user workspace. So a workspace which brings together all your merge requests, to-dos, bookmarks and stuff accessed from within the sidebar, and allowing users to quickly access this sort of stuff from the immediate sidebar as well, from any place within when they're working in GitLab. Allowing for persona menu profiles. So this is something that Salesforce had, where users are not necessarily interested in all these different workflow items right here. So you could potentially filter these views with like a little toggle button that drop down here. So developers would get a different combination of stuff. Operations could get a different combination of items. And then you could also view all of them if you wanted to view all of them. Relying on bookmarks, search and filter. So rather than having this tree where users constantly need to go back up and down in order to find the projects and groups that they want, having a search focused experience, because we've got a lot of stuff. This is a platform, so we can't avoid having all this information. So instead we'll use search, bookmarks and filtering to improve the relevance of the information that the user has seen, whilst allowing them to have access to all that information if they so desire. And then creating this more prominent action button underneath, but exploring different things like breadcrumbs as a nav option. So my recommendation for the MVC here is to effectively, in order to solve manage analytics, is to effectively test out number 3. So creating an instance level view, so analytics can start putting analytics pages at the instance level would be our first step. And then after that, we could potentially consolidate the instance and project and group views into one selection experience. So that would be the sort of MVC path that we may want to take. So a lot of information. I'll stop there and welcome your feedback.
So was your MVC recommendation go like 3, 2, 1? Because you said 3, 2, and I wasn't sure if the left side navigation, if that was supposed to come in with 3 or after 2.
I mean, the left side navigation isn't a must-have, so it would probably be 3, 2, and then other stuff simultaneously.
Okay.
But 3 and 2 are the most important ones for managed analytics, and then I'd also expect to collaborate with these solution or vision components with other groups and stages, because they obviously touch other groups and stages. So as it stands, MVC would be 3 and 2 are the essential ones for analytics.
My initial thought was I loved how you categorize like everything into um, different types of objects. That helped me also think about it in a modular way. So seeing when things were shifting, it helped understand like why things were being paired together. So that was helpful. Um, I thought your design of like pulling over the nav to left was interesting. It reminded me more of like Bitbucket, where I believe everything is just driven from the left. And then they also have like a collapsible section right next to it. But I see the direction and I like it. I think my um, lack of awareness is how do we actually get going on this? Because what I feel like is a sticking point with navigation is because it's like such a broad thing. Who helps move the dial forward?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and it's something I was wondering about, and that's sort of why I broke this vision down into vision components. So it made it more digestible in the things that we could tackle, and then it means that the smaller components only touch on fewer stage groups, meaning that we don't need to build as much consensus for each of the components. Um, but I agree. I mean, navigation is like is a key area, and I think the growth group is actually in charge of that now. So now that there's a team specifically as a DRI for them, it means we can contribute, but they will also have a certain responsibility for driving some of this stuff forward. And I'm just hoping that some of these ideas would be useful for them in driving their vision. And like this is why I'm framing it as like a managed analytics perspective on where we think that navigation could go, rather than like trying to speak on everyone's behalf.
Another question I have is if they can't get to 3 and 2 in a reasonable amount of time, meaning like sooner rather than later, what's the impact that you see it having on the analytics group? And basically, what's your alternative path? It sounded like you're just going to keep putting more links into the more drop down.
Yeah, so I think analytics is going to have to just go ahead and build the instance level view to start out with. So rather than waiting for any other team to do that, we need to do that because there's an instance level view that's required for analytics. So whether that goes behind the more drop down to start out with, or we just take the more drop down and make it like a menu item of its own, we'll explore the feasibility of those approaches. But I think analytics will try and actually drive that navigation change ourselves in the near future.
I had a question, Nick. I like what you've done for sure. I think it's an improvement. I had a question on the actions menu item. It looked like it was coupled with the search, which to me I found a bit confusing because it was right next to it. I thought that they would interact together. So that'd be a question I have if anyone else feels the same about that. Another thing is like, I wonder, especially the new projects, I feel like people would create new projects more often than not. So is that something that we want hidden behind that plus symbol? I don't know.
My initial impression was because, well, at least at 7, number 7 is when you started talking about the prominent action. So I was assuming we figure out those details later, was why I wasn't super keen on like fleshing it out immediately, but it is next to our current search bar, for better or worse. So it's not too far off from what we already do. Whether what we do is right, it is how it is today, just on the right instead of on the left, and a slightly different design language.
Yeah, I agree with Austin there. I mean, my visual design is there's a lot to be desired there, so I wouldn't rely entirely on the way it looks now, because I'm sure it could very much be improved by all the other designers in the team. But yeah, I think we can definitely explore that sort of stuff, and that's why all these components are sort of framed as hypotheses, so we can sort of test each one of them individually and see what works and see what doesn't.
You said number 3 was the one that addressed analytics needs in terms of making instance level objects more discoverable. Is that right? Number 3 in your issue?
Yes, yeah.
I was wondering, before we run out of time, could you talk through that one more time? I don't totally understand what the proposed change is.
So that is effectively how we have.
With your, can you share your screen again? Sorry.
Yeah. I'm doing it now. So the way that we have this side nav, which is specific for projects and specific for groups, I effectively just wanted to put like an instance there and take this more menu, which is effectively exactly the same as this, just with some items and move it to this side. Alternatively, security has done something where they've made a security center for themselves, and they have this capability. I call it a capability theme, which is just looking at it from this perspective. But effectively, this is an instance level view of security, and we could just have this as a security section within an instance level view. But this is something we can explore further.
Okay, so the
admin
proposal
area
is
also
to
does
put,
that.
yeah. So it seems like the one thing we could do is to put analytics under the more menu and then have this kind of dashboard, but for analytics. It seems like that would be a good first step. And then I love your proposals for the navigation improvements. Like highly encourage you to share it with the growth team. But I think probably in the near term, it makes more sense to do something like this. And you could also ask or talk to the security folks and ask them how they're, how users are discovering this and if users are having a hard time, and, you know, because maybe it wouldn't be, even though it's following a pattern that's established, it may not be the most effective choice, given that you have an alternative solution with the instance dropdown in the left nav. But
Yeah.
I also wonder, would somebody who looks at the security dashboard also look at the analytics dashboard? Because that would also kind of drive whether the right persona is going to discover the analytics dashboard if we follow this pattern that you're showing right now.
Potentially the persona would look at the same thing. I'd say this is a little bit as to why I have created the menu like this. Sorry for running slightly over. This is a little bit why I created the menu like this, is having access to these, if it ever loads.
Must be a lot of good design loading there.
So having access to these things just immediately like that within a menu was the thinking, that you can sort of easily jump through there, or alternatively having this instance level view. And the way I'm thinking about this is, rather than it basically being like a file and folder structure that we have currently, I almost see this type of navigation as a little bit more like a pivot table that you get within Excel, where it's taking either the workflow items or the workspace and flipping it on its head, depending on what you're interested in particular.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a really good proposal, and maybe a separate smaller issue with this proposal, and then making the argument that like putting it under the more menu is less optimal, and then that might, by making it a specific issue with that specific question, like what's better, putting it under the more menu or having this instance level dropdown, that'll spur the question of like, well, how many people are clicking the security dashboard currently? How are people engaging with the more menu currently, right? And that focuses the conversation around a smaller change, and then also compares two small changes with each other to solution ideas. But again, I like all the ideas in your issue, but it's just a bit big, and it'll be hard to have these like targeted conversations around it in that
Yeah, so
bigger
I
issue.
think that's the next step is breaking this down into MVC issues. But I was hoping to like think big, start small, and then ship fast.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah, thank you very much for the feedback. I'll basically just share this video in that issue and on the UX channel, and see if we can get some feedback from the broader team. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome ideas, Nick. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for putting it together.
Cheers.
Cheers.